This is episode 94 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And my guest today is Esther Nagel, who will talk about the benefits of consistent practice of pranayama. Let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. My guest today is Esther Nagel. She will be talking about pranayama breathing and how it's important in yoga and how she has personally used it. Welcome, Esther. I'm very happy to have you on the podcast today. And could you please introduce yourself and let the listeners know about you?
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be on your podcast. So I'm Esther, and I live in South Wales in the UK in a little valley called the Rhondda Valley, which is a very beautiful green valley with lots of mountains around. It's a very pretty little place to live. And I've been a yoga teacher now for 4.5 years. I trained to teach yoga as a way to change my life after something of a breakdown. I've been practicing yoga for quite a long time. It's funny, we're talking about breath, and it's really funny. My journey with yoga and the breath is actually quite a funny one. I started going to yoga classes regularly. It must have been about 11 years ago now. I have asthma. And I've had asthma since I was a little girl. But I was also a smoker because I had some serious self-sabotage issues, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about later. And I had an asthma attack, and I took a week off work because of this asthma attack. And during that week, I decided that what I really needed to do to combat my asthma was learn how to breathe, not give up smoking, which any sensible person would have done, but I decided to learn to breathe. So I started going to yoga. And I loved the postures. I'm quite naturally flexible. I think I have a touch of hypermobility, but I also did gymnastics when I was small. I was able to do the postures very well. And I love that. But I couldn't do the breathing because I have, as well as asthma, I have a dust allergy. So my nose was constantly blocked. And so I couldn't breathe through my nose. And so I really struggled with pranayama to such an extent that I actually really disliked it. I found I would get very stressed by it. It would make me quite cross, and I really didn't like it. But I loved the postures and I loved everything else about it. But at the same time, I was fairly unstable emotionally. I had a pretty serious drinking problem, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I had, since about the age of 20, I'd been self-medicating all of life's troubles with alcohol, and in copious amounts. And I'm 46 now, so that was quite a long time ago. When I started doing yoga, my yoga class was giving me a little bit of space where I could just allow myself to relax. But most times I was going home and I was drinking afterwards. So I wasn't relaxing properly. So whatever yoga was giving me, at that point, it wasn't enough. But I didn't know that because I didn't see that there was a problem in my behavior. I was so locked into my drinking was actually okay that I didn't actually recognize that there was a massive contradiction in my behavior. Then in 2013, I think life grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and shook me until I realized that that actually everything was going wrong in my life. I had a horrible year where I had work-related stress, I had family issues, I had a breakup, the fallout from a breakup, and childcare issues and all that kind of messiness that comes from a breakup. There'd been a lot of emotional abuse in that relationship. I was fairly fragile at this point, and my mum was ill, and it was just one thing after another, just kind of pummeling me down into the ground until I reached a point where I had to stop and realized that I was falling apart which was quite a shock. I didn't realize, but I was actually falling apart. And after a few months of just kind of losing it and going a bit crazy, I decided that now was the perfect time to train to be a yoga teacher, that I actually needed to do something different with my life. And I decided to train to be a yoga teacher. And this yoga teacher training, I thought I was going along knowing yoga. I thought I knew everything there was to know about yoga because I could do the postures. I went in very arrogant, thinking I knew everything. And within about 20 minutes, I worked out that I actually knew nothing. And it was an amazing moment when I realized that I was actually going to learn quite a lot. It was a real shock. One of the things that I really had to learn, obviously, in order to be able to be a yoga teacher, I had to learn pranayama. I had to learn how to breathe. And so I gave up. After a couple of months of struggling with pranayama, I was advised to give up dairy. And I gave up dairy, which sorted out the mucus problem, because there's a huge correlation between dairy products and mucus production, which if you have a mucus-based condition, that makes it worse. So I stopped taking dairy and was finally able to breathe. And as soon as I was able to breathe, it's like everything changed. Everything changed in my whole world. I started being able to relax without needing alcohol. I started to be able to deal with a stressful situation without needing to reach for a cigarette or a glass of wine. I started being able to sleep, which was, I'd had insomnia since I was a child. And that was a revelation in itself, just being able to actually lie in bed and fall asleep instead of having to either get very drunk so I could pass out or lying in bed for hours listening to the voice in my head telling me what an awful person I was, which is what I normally had. I was able to just manage my emotions a lot more. And I started to realize that it was because of my breath, that when something would arise, maybe an argument with my ex-partner or some difficulty would arise, I started, instead of responding immediately, instead of reacting from that emotional charge, I started to take a couple of deep breaths before I responded and started to change how I was responding to things. So I was feeling myself a lot calmer. And this carried on for quite a long time. And I started to notice all these little changes in me and this general state of calm that was part of who I was, rather than moments of relaxation. I was feeling quite relaxed certainly compared to how I had been. And it felt like I was more balanced. I was balancing out in ways that I don't think I had ever been, even since I was a child. I was always fairly tightly wound, I suppose, easily upset. And I just started to turn to my breath a lot more. And my asthma was improving because I was cutting down on how much I was smoking. I was cutting down on how much I was drinking. I was just feeling generally a lot healthier. And then after 5 or 6 months of my yoga teacher training, I stopped drinking. And this was the first time, apart from times when I'd been pregnant, this was the first time I'd made a decision to stop drinking and not panicked and started drinking again within 3 days. So I was able to stop drinking. I just told myself I wasn't drinking today, and I focused on, you made a lot of use of gratitude at this point. So focusing on how good it felt to wake up in the morning and be able to do my yoga practice, and how good it felt in the evening to be able to go to bed and know I was going to remember going to bed. And so using a lot of gratitude and using my breath to manage my emotions. That was 4 years and 5 months ago, and I have stayed sober ever since. And I really credit my sobriety with learning to breathe. I firmly believe, although I was doing lots of other work through my teacher training, I know that the biggest thing for me was being able to breathe, because it had been such a challenge for me throughout my whole life with asthma and with the dust allergy. I know that it was a massive factor for me, learning to breathe. Ever since then, I still have asthma, obviously, but I'm able to manage that a lot. If I get the wheeziness that you get with asthma, very often I can just breathe through that instead of having to reach for my inhaler. I don't get the panic asthma that I used to get. If I get stressed, I'll wheezy and uncomfortable. I don't get that anymore. I'm much more in control of my breath. And because I'm in control of my breath, I'm in control of my emotions a lot more. And it has been such a game changer in all aspects of my life, not just with my drinking, but with my parenting. I'm a much better mother than I used to. I'm a much calmer mother than I used to be. I'm more present in my life with my friends, etc. I'm just generally more in control of myself now. Not always, but
Well,
I'm
congratulations. That sounds like a massive change.
It really is. It's been a real. I mean, I really do think that this was, when we're born, the first thing we do is take a breath. And I really feel like when I learned to breathe, it was almost like I was reborn. It's almost like I had that new chance to take that new breath and start again, almost at the age of 41.
Oh, well, that's an amazing story. That really is. I have talked to a lot of people where, yoga has made a significant, but yours is really kind of at the top of the list there, because that's such an amazing change. And all due, you think, and I'm sure you're right, to pranayama. Are you teaching yoga now, or did you just do the teach? Oh, you are? Okay.
Oh, I do teach. Yeah, I've actually I came back from my class an hour ago. I was teaching a class tonight.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So I assume, and I could be wrong, but probably not, that you really emphasize pranayama when you're teaching a class?
Yeah, well, everything is done with the breath. So every movement we do, which I really focus people's attention on the breath. My local classes that I teach, it's generally, we do a lot of asana, but there's a lot of breath work. The tradition that I was trained in, the Rishi culture, Ashtanga yoga of Swami Kitananda, that is very breath focused. And so it's immersed in the culture that I've been trained in, and it's an integral part. They teach the 8 limbs of yoga, and obviously pranayama is a very important part of that. But I love to teach the breath. I love to teach people to breathe, because aside from pranayama as a part of yoga, I think it's such a fantastic tool for stress management. I mean, I've come from a very stressful background, and I know that people are so stressed in the world. And I just think we all have this fantastic tool that we're carrying around inside our bodies. And people don't realize just how powerful it is to actually stop and connect to your breath. When you connect to your breath, whether you're sitting in meditation, whether you're practicing pranayama, when you connect to your breath, it changes how you feel about everything. You're feeling your emotions differently, you feel your body differently, your mind, the relationship between your mind and body, it all just kind of becomes a little bit easier when you connect to your breath. And I think that is such a fundamental thing for us to do. Breathing is, you can't go very long without breathing. So if we can learn to connect to our breath, it's so deeply important to us for our survival, but also for our living. We can really live if we breathe. So I love to teach people to breathe, to really focus on pranayama, to teach people the basics as a way for them to just live a better life. Everything improves when you learn to breathe properly.
Do you do certain kinds of breathing in your yoga classes, like ujjayi or one nostril breathing, or do you just really focus on the movement and the breath?
It's a lot of it is focusing on moving with the breath. So if we're doing a movement, it's breathe in as you lift, breathe out as you lower. And there's a lot of practices that we do that are around actually just very basically expanding your lung capacity. So I don't do the ujjayi breath. That's not part of the way that I've been trained to teach. But we do focus on gradually increasing your lung capacity. So before you can do something like ujjayi breathing or the more complex pranayamas, you have to be able to breathe deeper. So it's teaching people the absolute basics, which we forget. We don't remember how to do it. When babies can do it. Babies breathe with every little last millimeter of their lungs. I remember when my youngest son was small, when I was doing my teacher training, I was watching him breathing. And he breathes, the way that you would teach somebody in a yoga class to breathe. He was breathing down into his belly and expanding his lungs, and you could really see it. But then by the time he was about 4, I noticed that his breathing had changed. It's all about taking people back to the basics, just re-establishing that connection with the breath, with connecting your mind and your body through the breath. And then I do other pranayamas, but gradually, I'm introducing them gradually. I mean, I work mostly with beginners. So it is really stepping back to the very beginning. I was pranayama tonight called Savitri Pranayama, which is breathing in for 6, then hold for 3, breathe out for 6 and hold for 3, which is a beautiful, relaxing pranayama. I love to do it if I do it if I have trouble sleeping, which I do sometimes still have bouts of insomnia. So it's a really good one for completely relaxing the body. So I was teaching them that tonight. So that was nice. They like that.
Yeah, I've done that one. It is a nice one.
Yeah.
Read some of your blogs, and I really, first of all, would like to congratulate you on your writing. You're very, very talented in that area. But one of the things I talked about, I read that I really wanted to talk about was that the correlation between breathing and your emotions, that you were talking about how that was making a huge difference to you. Can you kind of explain that a bit more?
Is that one of my recent blog posts that you've read?
It might have been. I read 3 or 4 of them, so I'm not too sure where it was.
I've been writing quite a bit this week about the breath and about emotions, because I've been going through some stuff myself, and so I've been really turning to my breath for processing my own kind of emotional turbulence. Because obviously I'm kind of new to feeling my emotions, particularly extreme emotions. You know, when I was drinking, whatever I felt, if I was happy, I would have a drink. If I was sad, I would have a drink. So all of my emotions got numbed. So I'm still quite new to actually experiencing emotions properly. And there are times when that gets quite overwhelming. And sometimes I've got caught up in it because, you know, sometimes even yoga teachers forget to do all this stuff, as I'm sure you know. We do forget our own advice sometimes, don't we? And I know sometimes I've got caught up in my emotions and then I forget to breathe. But then I know that when I do connect into my breath, whether it is in just taking some deep breaths or if it's sitting in a meditation and just observing my breath and just being with my breath, it changes how it takes the raw edge off those emotions. So if I am feeling really distressed about something, it allows me to kind of let go of the emotional charge and just see. So instead of like feeling I'm really stressed, it allows me to look at the problem rather than that whirlwind of emotions. So it allows me to step back and actually begin to see, right, well, what can I do about this then? This is how I feel. This is the reason why I'm feeling this way. What can I do about this? And I love particularly the link between the nervous system and the stress response and the relaxation response and the breath. And it's so powerful. We know intuitively, that there's a link between the nervous system and stress and the breath, because if somebody is stressed or if somebody's overexcited, you tell them to breathe. We tell our friends that, you know, if somebody's upset, you say, right, take a deep breath now, start to relax yourself. Or if someone's getting overexcited, you might remind them, breathe, no, you calm down. So we know this instinctively, but we forget when we're actually caught up in the emotions. But when you're stressed, your stress response, that's the reason that we have survived as a species for as long as we have. The stress response is there to keep us alive, and it changes the way that the body functions. And one of the things that changes when we get stressed is that our breathing changes, because the stress response is there for the flight or fight. You either need to fight or you need to run away. So your breathing naturally needs to change. If you've got to run away or you've got to fight a predator, you need to have a different way of breathing. But we don't have that problem in the modern world. But our bodies don't realize that the threat of being caught in traffic on the daily commute, or forgetting your phone when you go out for the day, or all these little things that happen throughout our day, the mind sees those as threats. And so the body is reacting as if we're under threat all the time. And so our bodies are stressed, and we might not even notice, and the breath is changing. So if you can slow your breath down, then your body starts to think, all right, we're relaxed now. and it starts to relax you, because the relaxed breath kicks in the relaxation response. So if you're feeling stressed and you take that deep breath, or a couple of deep breaths, or even if you can't take that deep breath, because sometimes if you're really anxious, a deep breath is nigh on impossible. But if you start to just connect to your breath and bring awareness to your breath, that in itself can be enough to kick in the relaxation response. And it is so powerful, and it can happen so quickly that you can switch through your breath. You can switch out of the stress response and into the relaxation response so quickly. It really is, it's an amazing thing. You know, I've seen it in other people, I've experienced it myself, and it just amazes me every time I see it in action, just how wonderful this breath is, that it can take us to the edge of stress and it can bring us back down again. And that's the same for all emotions. You know, there's that, what's his name, Fritz Perls, he founded Gestalt theory, I believe, and he said that fear is excitement without the breath. So if something is exciting, so say for example you're going to go on holiday, you're going on a holiday, you're going across to another country, you're going to be going in a plane, and you're going to have this amazing adventure, and you're really excited about it. And then if you could very easily become scared, because you could start to become fearful, and your breathing changes when your thoughts change. And the breath is a big thing that changes in that leap from fear to excitement, and vice versa. Your breath is a big factor in that. So if you feel fear rising, if you take a couple of breaths and look at ways that you can look at that as excitement instead, and look at opportunities, then through your breath you can get that space to actually change how you're thinking.
If you can control your breath, I think it's kind of hard sometimes, though, if you're in the grips of a really strong emotion, to remember that.
Absolutely, it really is. I know that I can talk about this, and I love to talk about it. But if something happens, I sometimes have to be reminded. My mother, frequently I'll phone my mother up and really upset about something, and she'd say, "Now, Esther, what would you say if this was one of your students?" Yeah, breathe. So it is, you can know it intellectually, but in the heat of the moment, if you've forgotten to do it before you get to that level, then yeah, you need a little bit of help sometimes. Even yoga teachers get stressed and upset sometimes. But then that's where making it a regular practice,
right,
benefits, because the more you practice it, the more it just becomes part of what you do. And the more you do your practice, I notice that my breath is quite a lot deeper most of the time. I mean, I'm probably breathing a bit fast now because I get excited about talking about this. But most of the time, when I stop and pay attention to my breath, I notice that my breathing is normally fairly slow and fairly deep. It's not pranayama slow and deep, but my natural breathing is quite slow. So my body is kind of got used to that way of breathing now. So it helps if you make it a practice, because then you're more balanced most of the time anyway. And it becomes then something that's much easier for your body to remember, that you just do that when it's stressful. You can see something is about to cause you stress, so you just remember. It's much easier if it's a regular practice.
So are you recommending that people have a regular pranayama practice as well as integrated, I assume, into your personal practice that's usually daily or several times a week?
Like I said, the style of yoga that I practice does involve a lot of breath work. Anyway, at the moment, it's amazing, isn't it? When you are you've got that connection with your body, you kind of know what your body needs. So at the moment, what I've been doing a lot of is meditation. Obviously, I teach, so I do a lot of asanas throughout my working week anyway. And so my personal practice this last couple of weeks, and I know that's got a lot to do with stuff I've been going through in my life, has been meditation. So I've been really deeply connecting to my breath. But it's what works for you, what works for me changes. I find what I need changes quite often, depending on what my body is feeling like, what my mind is feeling like. I kind of go with the flow. I listen to what my body wants. But if you can do something every day, I mean, I recommend, even if all you can do is spend 5 minutes just taking 5 minutes to just check in and see what your breath is doing and spend 5 minutes watching your breath, that is going to make a big difference to you. And I know not everyone has the time or the inclination to do a half an hour yoga practice or whatever, but finding something that works for you and making it a regular practice. It doesn't have to be an extended practice. Even 5 minutes will give you benefit and will give you some of that increased resilience that connecting to your breath will give you.
Advice, I think. 5 minutes makes a difference too, not just 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Esther, it's great that you came on the podcast. Is there anything that you feel you have to offer the listeners? Is there something in more depth than we've been talking about, or something new that you might like them to know?
My mission, I think that my mission is that I'd like to teach the world to breathe. There's that Seekers song, was it the Seekers? I'd like to teach the world. So mine is I'd like to teach the world to breathe. And I've become very aware that lots of people struggle with time. People don't feel that they've got enough time to do these practices. And one of the pieces of advice that I like to give to people is awareness is the start. So if you can't commit to a daily practice of anything, you don't have the time, you don't know how to do it, start to make some time throughout your day to just notice what you do, what your breath is doing. Just check in and see how you're breathing. Maybe set an alarm on your phone for like hourly intervals or something, or every time you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or maybe not coffee because that's going to affect your breathing. If you're in traffic or if you're at the supermarket or the store, find little triggers that you can set throughout your day to just check in and see what your breath is doing. See if you can notice what's going on at that moment. What's happening? How are you feeling? What are your emotions doing? And just see if you can start to notice the links between maybe if your breath is very fast, very erratic, are you very stressed? What's happening? And just that awareness is sometimes, it's incredible when we start to become aware of the breath, and when we even start to think about it, it starts to change naturally. I have had people, when I've been talking to people about the breath, people have come up to me after the talk and they've said, you didn't even tell us to change how we were breathing, but my breath slowed down when you were talking, because just having that awareness and just thinking about it makes your body kind of kick into doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is slow breathing. Our bodies want to breathe slowly. So when we become aware of the breath, it starts to just change the breath. So you may find that even just bringing your awareness to your breath might make a difference. And if you do notice that you're very stressed, just take a couple of breaths. You don't have to sit and meditate with your eyes closed. You don't have to go to a yoga class. You don't have to be on a yoga mat. You could be in your car stuck in the morning commute, and you can just focus on your breath. With your eyes open, you can just breathe, and it will change how you feel in that moment. You're there in the traffic, you may as well be relaxed about it. So bring that awareness to your breath, because how you breathe is how you live. And if you are breathing consciously, then you're living a bit more consciously and you can be more present in your moment.
Okay. Well, excellent advice. Thank you so much. Esther, would you like to give some contact details in case people might like to explore your blogs or even send you an email?
I would love to. Thank you very much. Yeah. I've recently started up a new website, so there's not a great deal on it at the moment, but I'm working on it. It's called Space to Breathe, and it's spacetobreatheacademy.com. And on there are some blog posts. You can contact me. My email address is esther@spacetobreatheacademy.com. And there's actually a 10-day little mini program that you could get for free on there, which is called the 5-minute breath. So I already mentioned about 5 minutes. So this is just a very simple breath awareness, breath observation practice that you do for 10 days, just to give yourself a little bit of a feel for that connection to the breath. So you can sign up to that there as well if you wish. I have got a Facebook group as well called Space to Breathe. And I think that's called Your Space to Breathe, facebook.com/groups/Your Space to Breathe. I'm posting stuff in there quite a lot and would love to see people from this podcast on there.
Yes, let's hope something happens like that. I think that would be great. So thank you so much, Esther. I think you've been terribly honest and authentic in what's happened to you and how breath has made a difference, and your wish to help others get through their issues, shall we say, their stress with breath. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think you had a very unique and authentic story to tell.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Thanks. Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.